Greetings everyone, welcome back to Radish Ceramics. In today's video, we are going to go through some basics of trimming, making handles, and some glazing methods. Trimming is but the post-processing of throwing. To trim a piece, you refine its shape, reduce its weight, and smooth out the bottom. Because when you remove the piece off the wheel, it's going to have a very rough bottom. Besides sanding it, you more or less want to trim it down. This piece I made yesterday is decently weighted and the bottom not as smooth and pretty dirty. So I'm going to refine the shape, reduce the weight a little bit, there's not much weight to reduce, and definitely smooth out the bottom. There's not many different ways of trimming, but different dryness to trim. It's a personal preference on what dryness you want to trim your piece at. I personally like to trim my piece bone dry, means absolutely no water at all. But I think the easiest way to get into trimming is to trim the piece when it's leather hard. First, I'm going to teach you guys how to use a regular wheel to center your piece and trim it. And later on, I'm going to use a kick wheel with sort of an auto centering device because it's easier for me to do it that way. But you have to start from the basics and you gotta learn how to use the minimum tools to center your piece on a regular wheel. I'm gonna take my piece from yesterday, look at the ring on the base wheel, not the back base wheel, and then position it such as it's sort of equal distance from all the rings, and then spin it slightly. You want to spin it slow so you don't destroy your piece. I'm going to position my finger next to the base and can feel sometimes it hits my finger and sometimes it does not. And stop the wheel whenever it hits my finger. It's a long and tedious process, but you gotta do it, you gotta do it. When you start the wheel, you want to push it so it's more towards the center. And repeat until you have it centered. Now that the piece is somewhat centered, I'm going to take some clay, split it into 3 chunks, and position them on the bottom of my vase as a triangular position to seal the piece onto the back, the wheel, so it does not move around. You don't want, when you trim it, the piece move around. Now that it's somewhat stable, I have various tools to choose from. You're gonna meet a lot of tools and you're gonna be very confused on what every single tool does. But it all does the same thing, it gets rid of clay. It's actually really just a personal preference on what tool you want to use. You can technically just use one tool and call it and use that one tool to trim everything, or you switch between many different tools, but they all does the same thing. You just feel it's better. I'm going to start off with this sort of tool to trim this leather hard clay because it gets rid of the most clay. And then I'm going to use these tools to refine it. I like to use these tools for bone dry piece and these two for leather hard pieces. You want to make sure your hand is stable. And don't go too far for trimming. You want to remember how much bottom you have so that you don't trim through it. My first job here is to smooth out the bottom. I might add a foot on this one, just to demonstrate. Now the bottom is somewhat smoothed out. I want to get rid of these bumpy parts right here. Maybe forming it into a foot shape or just refine the curve. Now before I do anything, I want to try to add a foot to it. So I'm going to dig down in the middle and hope I don't go through it. And sort of slowly dig away the clay. Well, I'm going to stop here for the trimming demonstration on regular wheel with leather hard clay. I'm going to be moving on to bone dry clay on the kick wheel. I have to do this or the video is going to last forever. The bonus clip for trimming is going to contain the entire process and it's in the end of the video. This is the kick wheel. You kick the wheel on the bottom so the wheel spins. And this is the mechanism that automatically center it for me, because if I rotate it, these pins go out and other way the pins go in. And I'm going to be demonstrating trimming this bone dried piece, this bow I made in the first video, on this wheel. Again, I'm not going to include the entire clip in it because it will last too long, but I'll demonstrate just the basics. I don't need to spend much time centering, just kick to go. And now that your piece is been trimmed, you can choose to attach a handle or not. If you're making a mug, or a pitcher, or just a vase with a handle. Here's how you do it. There are many ways of making handles, but I'm going to only explain 3 ways. Remember the extruder I told you about in the first and second video? You can choose to extrude a handle like this. You want to measure out how long you want the handle to be, and then cut it at the right amount. Now that you have finished trimming your piece, you can choose to add a handle to it. If you're making a mug, a pitcher, or just a vase with a handle, here's how you do it. There's many ways of adding a handle to your piece. I'm going to only explain 3 ways of doing it here. The first way is least labor intensive. Remember the extruder I told you about in the first and second video? You can use it to extrude out a handle. All you need to do is to cut it into the right length and then attach it. The second way is to roll out a slab and then cut it to the appropriate length. You can modify it by cutting off the edge, smoothing out the edge, or adding a groove in the middle. All these ways can be further modified by adding texture to it. You can choose to have a spiral texture onto it, or you can add a leaf pattern to it. It's all up to your own creative interpretation. The third way of doing it is also the way I like to do it, is to pull out a handle. To do this, first you need a chunk of clay, and then you slap it a bunch on the table. So you form a carrot shape. You want to slap it so it elongates. After you make a carrot shape, chunk of clay, you can now start pouring. You need a bucket full of water. You wet the clay first, and then use your thumb to grab the clay like this and pull down. Pull, 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 and pull. You slowly pull out a handle using this method. After you think you have the right length, you want to lay it down on the table and then cut it to the appropriate length. Usually you want your clay to dry out a little before you attach it, but now for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to do it. But here I'm going to start to attach the handle. Find a spot you want to attach the handle, top and bottom. I'm going to attach the handle from here to here. Make sure they're aligned vertically, so your handle looks even and nice. Scratch the two spots with a serrated rib or just a needle. You're gonna scratch it and then add slips to the two spots that you had scratched. After that, you want to take the top of the handle and attach it on there. You can press it on there, or you can choose to do something creative and bend it a little bit and attach it this way. It's more up to personal preference on how you attach the handle. But first, you have to make sure you hold the handle and attach the top part before you move on to the second part. You want to smooth out the attachment point. You want to rub the handle clay into the clay of the piece. You want to smooth it out and smooth out the connection point so it does not crack or break when fired or drying. After you have done that, you move on to this bottom part. Again, if you think you have a little bit too much clay, you can always cut off in the end. Like so. Again, I'm going to smooth out the connection point. Make sure it's well attached so it does not crack. You can use a rib to further attach the handle onto the piece and smooth out the connection point. Remember to go back and revisit the top after you've done the bottom. And make sure everything is smoothed out, nice and attached. Now this is how you attach a handle. Of course, this handle looks a bit deformed. That's because I haven't had the time for the handle to dry out. Make sure your handle dry out, but not too dry so you can't attach it before you attach your handle. Of course, I can leave it like this and call it a design, but that would be stupid. And that's how you attach a handle. And now, After you have finished making the piece, trimming the piece, and even firing the piece, it is time for you to glaze your piece. I'm here to explain 3 ways of glazing your pieces. 3 main ways. Of course, there's other ways, but I think they're just an extension of these 3 main ways. That includes dipping, spraying, and painting. Here I have 3 random pieces I grabbed from other students, and I'm going to demonstrate each individual glazing method. First, let's start off with dipping, the easiest one. Here, I have a bucket of glaze. It is a little bit unmixed, so I need to make sure the glaze is well mixed before I dip it. When you dip a piece, you want to make sure the bottom of the piece does not get in contact with glaze. Or when you're firing, the piece is going to stick on the shelf. So usually what people do is to put a layer of wax on the bottom of the piece before dipping. This way, the glaze does not come in contact with the bottom and the wax will just evaporate during the firing. Here, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to simply dip my piece into the glaze. The time it's spent into the glaze determines how thick the glaze is on it. But that's the problem here is, well, I have the outside glazed. How do I glaze the inside? Well, some people just dip the entire thing into it, turn it around, and glaze the inside as well. But in my case, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is take a little cup, pour some glaze inside the vase, and then pour it out while turning the piece so it covers every single inch inside the piece. And now the piece is glazed. Very, very simple way. The second method I'm going to be explaining is painting. Again, you want to take a little bit more glaze out, put it in a dish or something so you can sit down and spend your time painting the piece. Painting gives you a lot more leverage on what glaze you want on the piece, and you can add patterns even to the piece. So let's say I don't want my entire piece to be glazed in this glaze. I want this to have a wood fire-ish finish, and I just want lines of glaze. I'll just go slaps through, slaps through, slaps through, slaps through. And then you have pattern for the piece. But let's say, okay, I want to paint outside. It's a bowl anyhow, so I want the glaze to be all the way inside so it can contain liquid and such. So I glaze the inside. I usually will put this on a spinning board. But now, for demonstration purposes, I'll just brush it on there and brush it on there. When you're painting a glaze onto a piece, usually you're painting a very thin layer of glaze, so you want to make sure that you double layer it or even triple layer it to make sure you have enough glaze on your piece. But you also need to watch out to not have too much glaze on your piece, or the glaze is going to bubble or even pop off the piece and stick on the kiln, which is not what you desire. Last way of glazing a piece is spraying. Some of the spraying machines need to be outside because it's loud and it compresses air and spray it out. But some you need to blow it with your mouth. I'm not going to demonstrate the one with blowing with your mouth one, but I'm going to demonstrate the one with compressing air. It will be a little bit loud, but I'll try to edit it out. So this is a container for spray. You add glaze into it, and you go outside and spray. Now we're outside, I'm gonna try to spray my glaze onto the piece. You want to do this outside or under a film hood, so the glaze doesn't get around in the air and you breathe liquid glass into your lung. Okay, it's gonna be loud. And now this piece is glazed. There will be just 3 different ways of glazing your piece. The most glaze efficient one will be dipping, and then it will be painting, and least glaze efficient will be spraying. So if you are low in chemical or glaze, the better way is just to make a big batch of glaze and then just dip your piece. And then if you get to the lowest point of glaze and you can't dip it, so just paint it on there. Spraying gives you unique patterns, so you can also layer different glazes, but it does require a lot of glaze, and it's quite inefficient to just spraying glaze everywhere. You also risk the opportunity of breathing in liquid glass, which is never something you want. That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Please do the like and subscribe, maybe comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video.